Welcome, Gigi. Thank you for spending the day with us today.
Hi, everyone. So I think we tend to be surrounded by a lot of negative news. We've got massive unemployment. We're the most unequal place on the planet, and so on and so on. And I think a lot of that is overblown, and we've got a part of our economy that we do not measure, which is what I'm going to be talking about. I called it KasiNomics because when we talk about the informal economy or even the township economy, we tend to have this kind of sense of what does informal mean? It means unstructured, unsophisticated, small scale, low tech, and so on and so forth. And as you'll see, this isn't true to a vast proportion of businesses out there. And also this informal sector in many ways is the future of economic activity in South Africa. When I tell people that I'm involved in the kind of township or informal economy, they go, spaza shops. It drives me absolutely crazy because in most people's minds, this is the idea of what the informal economy is. And while there's many of these kind of spazas, or what people often call okijima mfana, which means run child, because the vast proportion of purchases are a child given money and running down the road. The reality is that the sector is actually very different, and spaza shops are only one small part of this economy. So as an example, this lady over here on the top is Miriam. Miriam wakes up at 2 in the morning and she goes down to Baragwanath taxi rank in Soweto, and she starts making amagwinya or vetkoek. And at 3 o'clock she starts selling. By 10 o'clock she sold almost 2,000 amagwinya for R1.50 each. And she makes about anywhere from 500 Rand to 800 Rand, depending on the time of the month, every single day from selling that. Then at about 10 o'clock, she starts selling garapao, deep-fried horse mackerel, and she does a couple of hundred of those by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she makes around about 800 Rand a day from that. So she can make anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 Rand a day profit from that. And yet we kind of go, oh, shame, this poor lady. I said to her, how did you start your business? She said, I was a maths and biology teacher in Soweto, at a school in Soweto, and I decided I want to go into business. So she said, I went to this course run by a guy called Raymond Ackerman. She says, do you know who he is? So I said, yes, I've heard about him. She said, I did this course. At the end of the course, he gave me 290 Rand in 1990 and said, go off and start your business. And she started this business, and she's building a double-story house in Meadowlands in Soweto, cash. She's bought herself a little NP200 bakkie that she uses for her business, also cash. And yet we kind of can't imagine the kind of scale of this, despite many people being like this. This is the hamburger of the townships. It's called a kota, which is a quarter loaf of bread, hence the name kota, with slap chips, acha, polony, and so on. And as you can see, it's endorsed by the Heart Foundation. And banting friendly. So in 2005, I was asked by Parmalat to launch cheese slices in the townships. I have a marketing business and I do consultancy and advisory. I'm not a researcher. I'm an author by mistake. So my business looks at, helps people from a Capitec to a ShopRite to a Parmalat and everyone in between in this space. And I was asked to launch cheese slices by Parmalat in 2005. When we launched, at the time, there was no cheese in the townships. In fact, rich black kids were called cheese boys or cheese girls because only rich black kids got cheese. We launched then. Today, Parmalat sells almost 3 billion Rands worth of cheese slices a year, primarily going into kotas and vetkoek in a market that never existed before, which kind of just gives you a sense of the scale potential of these kind of spaces. So this is some of the businesses in this kind of space. But we also hear, about people in townships and stuff, and we generally have this very negative perception. If the media is to be believed, the vast proportion of people live in an informal dwelling or shack like this. What percentage of households, we've got 18.5 million households in South Africa, what percentage would you say live in an informal dwelling or a shack? Percentages? 15? 40%? 4%? Okay. The CEO of Capitec said to me 80% of people live in informal dwellings. The number is actually 8% of households live in informal dwellings, and the vast proportion of people, almost 90% of people, live in formal dwellings. When I arrived in Gauteng, I was working in land rights in a human rights organization. I took that picture in 1989 in Soweto, in Diepkloof in Soweto. And at the time, every single house in the townships was either a forum house like that or an informal kind of shack structure. You can see at the bottom right there's the little white fence. Every single house there, apart from that little forum house, used to be a forum house. And we've had this extraordinary transformation of both informal and formal homes where we've actually ended up with the 90% of formal. Now, this is very important. It's important for a number of reasons. The minute people live in a formal dwelling, they spend more money on design and decor and other kind of investments as opposed to kind of function. Function is keeping the rain out and the cold out. The other thing about this is this entire transformation has happened with no form of formal credit. It has happened with a range of different investments, which I'll talk to just now, which hasn't relied on. And we should be celebrating this remarkable transformation of our built environments by people with no forms of formal credit into this kind of space. The other remarkable change that's happened is a rapid growth of smaller households. You can see at the top there, 23% of households today are one-person households, and 19% almost are two-person households. 42% of households today in South Africa are one- or two-person households. And our average household size is around 3.3 people per household. Now, why is this important? This is important because smaller households spend less money on staples, on household expenses, and spend more money on personal care, beauty, electronics, and other things. And it's also boosted a massive growth in backroom rental, one-room kind of flats like some of these over here. There's about 20 billion rand a year is earned by South African households in backroom rental. And this would be the typical kind of household. So we have massive formality and we have smaller and smaller households. In fact, the little thing at the top there, in the last 2 or 3 years, our population has grown by 1% and our households by 3%. People are moving out of the communal home into their own homes. So the majority of our households are young, small, and live in a formal dwelling. Now, there's a little company in Sweden called IKEA. IKEA started their business about 40, 50 years ago using off-cut pieces of wood to make flat-pack furniture for one- or two-person households living in small formal dwellings. The demographic of our society today in South Africa is no different from Sweden then. But we don't imagine it like that, and yet it is identical, and the same influences happen as a result of that. When I talk about the rural environment, people have these images of cows and grass, kukwanas, little beehive huts or houses like this. And yet, again, it is very dramatically different. There's a company called Galaxy Retail, and Galaxy Retail uses AI and Google Earth to measure the value in building material only of houses. And they use it to work out kind of opportune business cases for putting a shopping center in or whatever it might be. So how's this figure from them? There are more houses in the 1.5 million rand plus group, only in building materials, in the former rural homelands than in the city of Cape Town from Melkbos to Gordons Bay, Wellington, Paarl, and Franschhoek added together. That's just in the rural environments. Had this extraordinary transformation of housing, and these are primarily not financed. And what we're seeing is people are moving out, like that picture over there, out of the rural areas and aggregating around rural towns. So a booming rural town, places like Pongola, Mkanduli, Mthatha, Tugela Ferry, where I grew up in Msinga, and so on and so forth. And just the other day I was in Bushbuck Ridge and a township called Nkuwa and stuff like that. It's just extraordinary. It's just pillars and reflective glass and stuff, and people investing in these. And these are, in essence, the investments in retirement. We say, people don't invest in retirement, people don't save. Not true. They just invest in different ways. So these are the Hermanuses of the world, or the people go and retire in the Midlands. Well, people here go to, Thohoyandou or Guyana or whatever to build these houses and invest in these houses. So even a transformation within the rural environments. And people invest in these houses. I mean, one of the big trends at the moment is chrome gutters, like these ones over here. Now, I was out with the ShopRite Financial Services team recently in the township, and I told them, I said, chrome gutters is a big thing, and everyone was pointing them out. And we went into this house over here, and as we walked in, one of the ladies said, look at the pattern on those gutters. What's the pattern on that gutter? Louis Vuitton. What does it tell you about this? And isn't this what we should be celebrating, this transformation, people investing in these kind of things and doing it in a different way, but a real investment happening. And if we look at this economy, we have to change our mindsets around that spaza thing. So as an example, just if we look at the fast food sector, what I call KasiNomic, we have about 50,000 outlets doing about 90 billion rand a year in turnover. One of the fastest growing sectors. We hear a lot about the foreigners in the informal sector. The fast food sector is 100% South African sector, 90 billion rand a year. Over and above that, we have about 44,500 licensed taverns doing about 110 billion rand a year. That's 200 billion rand, and alcohol restaurants call it informal restaurants. And what's growing the fast food sector? Smaller households, people living in back rooms don't want to cook in those rooms. They'd rather walk outside and go and get chicken dust or a shisanyama or whatever it might be, or go and buy it and bring it home and warm it up in there. So a fundamental shift in kind of lifestyles and spending happening. According to Hollard Marine, the most stolen product in South Africa's ports, imported product, is wigs and hair extensions. Despite my hairstyle, I've done a lot of work in hair. Hair extensions are the most stolen product. It used to be coal, now it's hair extensions, according to Hollard Marine. 10 billion rand across about 60,000 what people call saloons. Now, the beauty sector is growing incredibly fast. Lashes, nails, personal care items, hair, and so on and so forth. Again, why? Smaller households spend more money on personal care, beauty, and so on and so forth. But let's talk about the spaza sector. 100,000 spazas doing about 187 billion rand a year. Interestingly, 70% of these are four groups: Somali, Ethiopian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi. And they pay South African households 25 billion rand a year in rental. One of the numbers we don't measure when we look at this kind of thing. But this shop here, Africa Discount, is what I call a spazarette, a more supermarket type spaza. And this is where the real growth is happening. And look at that shelf over there. That is an Eritrean shop in Umlazi. And in that shop over there, he has these huge lines. It looks like a Dis-Chem. Again, people spending patterns shifting as we have this more formality, smaller households, and so on. I'm running an amazing program for Supreme Flour, part of RCL, with the township bakeries. There's about 10,000 township bakeries out there. But I just want to profile this guy over here. Sam over here has a bakery in Naledi in Soweto, and he bakes about 600 loaves of bread a day, and he does buns and rolls and stuff like that. And I said to him, how did you start this business? He said, I was the head librarian at UNISA. And I took my pension and I decided I'd always bake cakes for my friends and whatever, and I wanted to be a baker. So I took some of my pension, I started this business. I said, well, that's great. And he laughs. He says, I hope it will pay off as much as my pension would have looked after me. So I said, well, I know your wife started another bakery just down the road. I said, what was the money behind that? He laughed. He said, I took a little bit more money out of my pension and I started that. Now, the point about this is often people in this space, we kind of think they're there because they have no alternatives. a vast proportion of the more successful businesses are people who've left a formal or a corporate job and started that kind of stuff. But more importantly, this two-pot thing that's happening at the moment, I believe a vast proportion of those will be people who will take that money out and invest it in a business or in the future, maybe some chrome gutters, but a lot of those things. And then suddenly we have a different view. People aren't taking that money out and then going off and spending the money on TVs and so on and so forth. Maybe they are spending it on that. And what proportion is there? Because outside of that, there is no access to finance in this kind of space. It's impossible to finance it. There's an entirely unfinanced space, which is a problem because we should be looking at how we could add to that. If we look at how do people build, generally we have three kind of things. The first one is that, and you have these really good township builders there, you have three forms of financing. One is lay-by. Every single month you put money aside, and after 6 months, what you do is you have a builder who comes and he gives you a quote for his labor, and then he gives you a list of materials you need. And then you take that list of materials, you go to Cash Build or an independent hardware, and you get a quote, and then you start lay-buying that. And once you have it, you phone the builder, saying, Lungile, I'm ready, and then he comes and he starts building. So lay-by is the one. I'm a society, stokvels. In fact, most stokvels today, only about 14% of stokvels are that traditional bunch of gorgors buying groceries at the end of the year with their stokvel money. Most of them are what people call I'm a society, where they're savings stokvels. And then the last one is brick-by-brick home loans. In essence, what you do is that every single month you start buying a couple of bricks, or you buy a bag of cement and so on and so forth. You know, in the old days, you used to have your bed up on tins or bricks because of the dogolosh. Now you've raised it because you can fit the tiles and the cement and stuff. Now, if I said to my wife, or my wife said to me, let's extend the patio or add a room. And I said, that's great, Sue. Start buying bricks. What did she say to me? People tell me black people and township people, they don't save. And number two, they want instant gratification. Absolute rubbish. People here are doing lay-by where they don't have this thing, but they're investing every single month, putting money aside. Or they're buying bricks and they're putting the money into that. The difference is that we don't understand those, and we don't understand the triggers that trigger why people do that and how they do them, or what do they desire. When we're telling people, oh, why don't you save for retirement in Hermanus? They're going, I want to have a double story in Tugela Ferry or whatever it might be. And so this is where the disconnect often happens. I don't have time to go through it today, but if you look at the informal sector, if you took a mirror to the formal economy, you would have every one of those businesses reflected in the informal economy. So anything from the taxi sector, 50 billion rand a year, backroom rental, 20 billion rand a year. Even the muti, traditional herbal medicine business, is 18 billion rand a year. And most of these figures are not my figures. These are from industry and other sources. So about 750 billion rand a year, just in the figures that are available. I believe that represents about 2/3 of the total sector. So you're probably talking at least R1 trillion a year in turnover. And that's excluding the hawkers, the bakeries, the internet cafes, the caterers, and so on and so forth. In fact, I presented a while ago at a business conference in Hermanus, and before me, Gerrie Fourie, the CEO of Capitec, was talking, and he said, we've done a lot of work with Gigi, and he's changed the way we look at the sector and the opportunities in there. And he said, the one thing that keeps me awake at night is the opportunities in what they call the emerging economy. And he said, we have 22 million personal bank accounts at the moment. He says, I believe that we could have 22 million informal business accounts in the next few years. When it was my turn to talk, I said, Gerrie, I remember you standing up and going to the coffee station and saying, Gigi, dis kak. There is no way this is as big as you say it is. He said, no, but I'm a convert. They went and checked the stuff out. So in many ways, the informal economy, if that's what you want to call it, is powering a sluggish formal economy. And we can see it through various things. As an example, in the shopping center space, the Vugela Property Fund, a listed entity, spoke about trading densities. Trading densities are turnover per square meter. And just to read it there, township shopping centre properties lead the way with 13% increase in trading densities. Rural portfolio, that's as rural towns, 7.2%. Urban shopping centres, the shopping centres around us, 4.5%. The rural and urban shopping centres, 2 to 3 times faster growth. How is that possible if we have massive unemployment and all of this kind of stuff? So the real growth is happening in that space. Exemplar, a listed business, focus on township and rural malls paying dividends. I'm talking this year's numbers. Township mall owner Dibula sees buoyant occupancies as informal economy holds its own. I mean, these are headlines from the financial business sector. Capitec's profit grows 15%. I think the economy is stronger in the informal market than anyone anticipates, says the new convert, Gerrie Free. ShopRite delivers knockout half-year sales. This is a month or so ago. South Africa's hair imports surged by 64% in 4 years. That's where you should be invested. Certainly I should be. Thriving versus striving, a report that came out last year on the black middle classes. South Africa's black middle class has evolved in the past 15 years. There are 1 million more black middle class individuals than white middle class individuals, sitting at about 4 million black middle class individuals, a large proportion of them not sitting with Model Cs in the suburbs, but in these environments that I'm talking about here. And they talked about thriving versus striving because they said compared to their white counterparts or other races, the black middle class was thriving. And scale of cash economy in South African townships stuns FirstRand. They bought a business that has financial services in the township space. And they were talking about wholesalers, informal wholesalers doing 40 million rand a month. Little wholesalers doing this. And the reason they knew it is that they had this business called, I'll remember just now, where they have drop boxes for cash in wholesalers. And that 40 million rand was money being put into those safes. So again, people say, oh, well, people don't want to pay tax and so on and so forth. That's why they're in cash. Actually, people are in cash because they don't have alternatives. And it's not got anything to do with tax, and that's another long story. But talking about cash, there's a massive growth of digitization happening, and very soon cash will be a smaller part of our economy. And this is very important because we can measure it. SARS can tax it. I had meetings with SARS the other day. They said, these people aren't paying tax. Come help us work out how to pay tax. I was like, oh, so I'm the one who's going to get them into trouble. There's a company called Kazang in that green device over there where they have these devices called VAS devices which you can pay and get airtime and electricity, bus tickets, lotto tickets and whatever. And they added a card acceptance device to these. And they have about 70,000. Lesaika is a listed company that owns Kazang. And this is a quote from their CEO. I did some work with them recently. Card payments are skyrocketing. They do 2 billion rand a month across 70,000 devices. In 2021, they did 0% card acceptance or payments. 42% of that 2 billion rand a month in November 2023 was now card. I believe cash will go from about 80% to probably about 30 to 40% in the next 3 to 5 years, probably in 3 years. I was involved in launching a product called PayShop, which is an instant mobile to mobile, account to account using a phone to pay it. And so we have a huge amount of digitization happening across a range of different companies, Kazang, Shop2Shop, Flash, iKhokha, HelloPay, and many more. I believe the real unicorns, the real new businesses are going to happen in this financial services, card and digitization space. Really worth looking at it because you've never heard of Kazang and then suddenly they're doing 2 billion rand a month and so on. Shop to Shop, I think, does almost 3 billion rand a month across about 80,000 devices. And this digitization is going to accelerate, and it creates visibility. And then what people like Alcock do, Alcock also has a device like that, is what they do is they give you a loan based on the transactions, on card transactions you have through your device. So you're incentivized as a business to say, Alcock, don't pay cash. Why don't you just tap your card over here? And they've seen a move because of that. And then they extend a loan, and that loan, they don't deduct an amount at the end of the month for it. They take a tiny percentage from every single transaction. So you don't actually feel it, and you don't have cash flow issues because it's actually being deducted in small amounts. And at any given time, they've got like 50 million rand in loans out there, and the same with Yoko and many of the others. And this will be transformative in many ways to our financial services sector. So coming towards the end, a lot of people say to me, what about unemployment and so on? And this lady over here sells toilet paper at the Baragwanath taxi rank. She takes little bundles from a roll of toilet paper and she sells them for 2 rand each. I said to her, how much toilet paper do you, how many bundles do you sell? She was embarrassed, she wouldn't tell me. So I went to look, how many people go through Baragwanath taxi rank? How many would you say in a month? 11.5 million. That's a shitload of business. So I was telling a friend of mine, just an aside, I said to him, he manufactures toilet paper. I told him about this lady. He's like, hang on, how many things does she do? So I show him. He says she can get 40 to 60 sub-rolls of toilet paper from a roll at 2 rand each. And she buys that roll of toilet paper for 5 rand. Now, guys, that's a return on investment. But if you say to her, do you have a job? She says, ngiyasebenza nginamsebenzi, which is a play on words. I work, but I do not have work. Because we have created a society where a pay slip is a job. We cannot extend you anything. We can't take a debit order off your account for investment or for credit or whatever it might be unless you have a pay slip. In fact, if you go down to any of these kind of, probably around here as well, taxi ranks, whatever, you find these posters on the wall. One poster says, find lost lover. The other one says, penis enlargement. Can see I've been looking. And the other one will say, credit, blacklist not important, bring 3 months pay slips and 3 months bank statements. If you do not have 3 months pay slips, 3 months bank statements, you don't exist. And yet we have this massive opportunity if we look outside of the pay slip thing. And in fact, there's a company called Africa Response, a research company, who wanted to check out youth unemployment. So they went to thousands of youth, and they said, are you unemployed? The youth said yes, and then they asked them, do you have any form of income? Among respondents who classified themselves unemployed, 41% are earning up to 15,000 rand a month from baking, building, beauty, and so on and so forth. So 41% of those youth that we stressed about are actually doing quite well, earning 15,000 rand a month. I believe formal payslip figures don't reflect a lot of this, and actually real unemployment or lack of income, of an income like a passive income like backroom rental or spaza rental, real unemployment is closer to 12 to 15%. And I was looking the other day at, I saw a headline from in one of the media, and it said, shock and horror, 23% of social grant recipients claim the social grant is their only or main form of income. I'm like, hang on. 77% of social grant recipients are saying it is not my main form of income, and 77%, almost 80% of social grant recipients are going out and hustling and running a business and earning additional amounts of income. Isn't that the headline we should have? Isn't it extraordinary? So people say to me, it's such a pity black people, we don't have more like township entrepreneurs. Black people aren't really into hustling and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. And I'm like, actually rubbish. the vast proportion of people are out there. The social grants are actually being used to supplement some things, but actually it's not making people lazy. Certainly maybe the 23%, but almost 80% are going out there and going and hustling and working. And that's the mindset we have to change, is how do we create opportunities for ourselves and for people in that space? I talk a lot about the opportunities to scale up. Is that the businesses are there, how do we help them scale through financing and other things? And also, we have to say, actually, how many of those people are interested in getting jobs? And isn't that wonderful? That they're not wanting to go and line up and get a job somewhere and work at ShopRite or Capitec or whatever, that they're actually running these business very successfully, boosting our economy, spending money on cheese slices and chrome gutters and so on and so forth. And that's actually a great story that is true for South Africa today. So in ending, I wrote this in one of my books. The informal world is inhabited by tribes of survivors, of gasipreneurs, of tabletop traders, hawkers and hustlers, gasikos restaurateurs, spazaret superstore, and backroom rental barons. Go among them, give them respect, they are the future. And we should be looking, in ending, I talk about near future trends. What are the trends and how can we capitalize on that? Because that's where the opportunities lie. Thank you very much.
Take some questions. Yeah.
Up to you. I've saved you 9 minutes.
Okay. No, absolutely. I think you can
Any
take
questions? Otherwise, lunch. Yeah.
That was fantastic, thanks. I guess when you were talking, one of the economies I was thinking about, which was similar and has gone through quite a transformation in the last 10 years for lots of reasons, is India. Is anything that you look at now here and what's happened in India, which are kind of parallels as to what can help to kind of, I guess, free up the things you were talking through?
So I haven't done a lot. I've never been to India, but I know quite a lot. In fact, that PayShap product, which we launched for, helped develop and launch for BankServe for the banking industry, was based on a product in India called UPI, United Payments Initiative, and a Brazilian product called, I think, Pexi or something. And in essence, it was about digitizing payments and removing things like slower payments. So a lot of the resistance to card payments is that you wait for, it's 3% or 5% with the Yoko device, merchant fee. If your net margin is like 15 or 10%, you're losing a lot of it to that. And the other one is that you have to wait 24 hours or 12 hours at best to get your money. So to accelerate the receipt of money, make it cheaper to take away from cash, is one of the things that really make these businesses, can transform these businesses. That's actually one of the primary ones. The other thing that the Indians have done is they've understood the concept of aggregating a large number of small businesses. So for instance, in the dairy industry, they don't have massive farms. They have lots and lots of little farmers who are milking their cattle, and they've pulled them in using technology where they have a tanker that comes on demand down a little thing and collects the same amount of milk from 10,000 farmers as opposed to going to 20 mega farms. And this is the kind of thinking you need to think about. How do you aggregate these businesses? And technology allows us. If we look at Uber and Airbnb and these kind of things, it's about aggregating lots and lots of little businesses or beds or whatever it might be. Those two things, I think, are the major things about aggregating things, and as well as then bringing technology, particularly in terms of payments. Great. Thank you very much.